Support for Central Florida Public Media comes from the Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University Worldwide Campus, providing students from all 50 states and 119 countries with innovative education and opportunities for success. More at erau.edu/ww.
I'm Sharon Stone. This is Engage.
In May, Americans saw peak inflation for 2026 top out at 4.2%, a number that dropped 0.7% over the following month. In that same period, the Consumer Price Index dropped nearly 0.5%. These numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics seem abstract, but consumers are feeling their effects as they fill their gas tanks, feed their families, pay their energy bills, and maintain health care and housing. Over the past year, the price of beef has increased by roughly 12%. At the beginning of this year, retail gas averaged $2.92 a gallon nationally. Since the beginning of the war in Iran in March, that average has shot up to more than $4 a gallon. Here in Florida, the average is slightly lower at $3.96 a gallon, according to AAA. This week, housing lender Freddie Mac announced the 30-year fixed mortgage rate rose to its highest level in 2026, making home buying right now a bit more expensive. Congress did pass the 21st Century Road to Housing Act into law last month. It went into effect without the president's signature. While the act eases regulations on the home building industry, there's little else on the congressional docket immediately addressing policy that would see economic relief at the kitchen table. Additionally, the 2025 Big Beautiful Bill cut $187 billion from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program over the next 10 years, removing 4.5 million Americans from the federal food program, including more than 500,000 in Florida. Yesterday, Engage spoke with two of Central Florida's congressional representatives, Democrat Darren Soto and Republican Randy Fine. We spoke about the state of the economy, their efforts to alleviate some of the pressure consumers are experiencing, and addressing some of the causes of this downturn. Darren Soto, whose district includes Osceola County and parts of Orange and Polk counties, spoke to what he feels is the root cause of this affordability crunch.
The tariffs, which we've opposed on multiple occasions, at least on the Democratic side of the House, those are raising costs, and they were done without congressional approval. And so that's a big fight to try to address that. The Iran war, done without congressional authorization. We've lost 18 troops, and it's put pressure on costs as well, both the energy and fertilizer costs affecting agriculture, food prices. And then we also see mass deportations that are raising home prices as well as food prices. So it's affecting all these different things, from food to housing, energy, all these things that people care deeply about.
Is there a legislative path to mitigating this economic turn outside of tariffs and the Iran conflict?
Well, those are the two main drivers, and certainly we already filed and passed a bill disapproving of the Iran war that passed in a bipartisan fashion in the House. The Senate voted for it, then against it. And so those are the two main drivers. And then, having a farm bill wouldn't hurt. I was proud to cross the aisle to vote for a farm bill out of the House, making sure our farmers, growers, ranchers have all they need to help our food supply would be another thing that could be done this Congress. And then a new infrastructure law that helps, although that's more long-term, with the movement of goods. We're getting to the end of the funding. We last big infrastructure law that helped us deliver funding for I-4. I got to announce $70 million just recently for the Orlando International Airport for expansions there, $10 million for the Kissimmee Airport. So these are things that could help: a farm bill, an infrastructure law long term. But in the short term, the tariffs, stopping the mass deportations and bringing the Iran war to a close would all help lower costs.
553,000 Floridians have lost SNAP benefits over the past year. What are your concerns about the culmination of those benefit losses and the state of the economy, especially when it comes to things like food prices?
I'm deeply concerned. It's why one of the reasons I voted against the big ugly law. It cut SNAP by 25%. So we saw 600,000 Floridians, as you mentioned, that lost their food assistance, and also cut Medicaid by 15%. So we're seeing folks now starting to lose their Medicaid going into this year, next year, with requirements for enrollment twice a year. And so these are things we got to address, at least as for SNAP in the Farm Bill. And farmers are already reeling from higher fertilizer costs, higher energy costs and gas costs and diesel costs. They're reeling from the labor shortages of the deportations. They've lost foreign markets because of the tariff war and U.S. aid. And now on top of that, they're losing demand from the SNAP program, where a lot of the SNAP program gets their food from Florida farmers, ranchers, and growers. And I think about, all these young families, because a lot of the folks who are getting food assistance, they're kids, they're seniors, they're veterans, they're Floridians with disabilities, the most vulnerable in our community. And I have no doubt, because of that law, that some folks are going hungry in Florida, and that's unacceptable.
Housing affordability in Florida is approaching a crisis. Beyond the 21st Century Road to Housing Act signed in July, forwarding regulations to bring housing costs down. What else can be done to address the housing cost crisis, both for homeowners and for renters?
So first, we have worked on multiple different affordable housing projects, everything from Haven on Vine with the city of Kissimmee, which is a rapid rehousing center, and the Thrive facility that is done with the Hope Center. They're both in the 192 corridor. We've worked to help pass funding for HUD, and now we've seen in the district literally over 2,000 new low-income housing tax credit units open up in South Orange, and especially in Osceola County, in places like St. Cloud and Point Siena, Kissimmee, and South Orlando. So that is helping. We just opened the Buen Vecinos facility with Osceola Council on Aging. So worked on funding for all those projects. We do need to see a reprieve with regard to property insurance. On the federal level, we deal with flood insurance. Most of it is on the state level, but making sure to reauthorize flood insurance and making sure we can help backstop private industry through reforms in Washington might be able to help out as well. And then working on a budget this year so that HUD doesn't get their budget flatline. All those things can be very helpful, because in particular, the low-income housing tax credit has been a huge driver of a lot of the new affordable housing for our region.
What does a reasonable exit from the Iran conflict look like?
Well, first, it's incumbent upon the president, who got us into this war without congressional consent in violation of our Constitution, to put forward, and it is their job to put something forward. I will tell you, though, some of the contours of what we'd like to see is we definitely need the Strait of Hormuz open again. We need a strong containment strategy for the nuclear material that has been captured underground in a successful raid that happened earlier this year. We need to make sure that we're minimizing, ending these attacks of these proxy groups that are hurting us and our allies. These are all critical things. And then in the long term, we have to restore the stockpiles of missiles and weapons that the administration has really allowed to go to unacceptable levels.
Listener Lynn Larson wrote in asking, what are you going to do to strengthen Social Security? This is the election cycle when work needs to be done to fix the upcoming shortfalls in Social Security funds for current and future benefit recipients. This is both a financial security issue and a faith in government issue for all who contribute to Social Security. What does strengthening Social Security look like to you?
First of all, I agree. It's a code red with regard to Social Security right now. 6 years from now, if Congress does nothing, then recipients can receive a benefit as high as 25% less, a 25% cut. And so Congress has to step up. I've been a sponsor for many years and a supporter of the Social Security 2100 Act. This act would raise the cap on Social Security withholdings. Right now, it's about 180 something $1,000, and then no other Social Security taxes paid. We need to make sure that the wealthiest among us are paying the same share that our firefighters and our servers, our cops and our teachers are paying. And so this would bring us a long way to making sure we could shore up benefits through 2100 and beyond. And I've talked to a lot of young people, millennials and Zoomers, who would be willing to contribute to make sure that Social Security will be around for them in the next generations. And so I absolutely agree. Congress, unfortunately, seems like always like a little kid waiting to the last second to do their homework. We can't do this with Social Security. We need to do something this term or next term and resolve this crisis because 6 years will happen in a blink for so many seniors.
Darren Soto represents Florida's 9th congressional district. Across the aisle and across the state, Randy Fine represents Florida's East Coast from Butler Beach to South Daytona. I asked Fine what he believes to be the first step in fixing the economy.
I think our number one focus is increasing the rate of deportation of illegal immigrants. That is the largest driver of affordability issues in the United States. The Federal Reserve just did a study that found that rents are 20% higher and housing prices, if you own, are 30% higher than they would be if we didn't have 20 to 30 million illegal immigrants in our country. But it's not just housing. You talked about health care. Well, when you're sitting in the ER behind illegal immigrants, who's paying for their health care? You are. When a child of an illegal immigrant goes to a school in Florida, who pays the bill for the $10,000 it costs to educate that child? You do. And when you have your auto insurance and you have that line for uninsured and underinsured motorist insurance, what are you paying for? You're paying for insurance for illegal immigrants who shouldn't be driving on our roads. So the single greatest thing we can do to make Florida more affordable is continue mass deportations until every single illegal immigrant is gone, reducing this massive, massive drain on our economy.
Do you attribute any of these economic conditions to either the administration's tariff program or the conflict in Iran?
I think that gas prices are a little bit higher than they would be otherwise because of the threat of Iran's nuclear weapon. And I've acknowledged that multiple times in interviews. I think a lot of what we're going on too is simply the results of 4 years of massive inflationary policies by Joe Biden. The data shows that prices aren't continuing to go up. What they haven't done is they haven't gone down. And that's a very difficult thing to do when 20 to 30 million people have come in.
Data is showing that prices at the grocery store are up, not stagnant.
I think non-core inflation's up 2.3% this year, as opposed to the double digits that we saw. I'm not saying prices aren't too high; they are, but they are largely a result of the policies that we saw. But again, when you have 20 to 30 million people creating a source of demand that shouldn't exist, prices are driven by two things in this world: supply and demand. If supply doesn't change and you have a massive influx of demand from people who shouldn't be here, prices will go up. And I know the left does not want to acknowledge the huge drain to our economy and the massive increase in prices that come from illegal immigrants, but that doesn't change the fact that it happens.
And I just want to circle back to a number you said. You said between 20 and 30 million. That's the number of undocumented immigrants you're citing in the United States currently?
Well, I don't know what an undocumented immigrant is. There are people in this country legally, and there are people in this country illegally. And conservative estimates are that there are 20 to 30 million who came in under Joe Biden alone. The scenes that we saw in Spain of a few days ago were happening every day on our border while Joe Biden was president. These people are here in our country. And to think about it, if you've got two families and you have one apartment, and one family is American, and the other family is an illegal immigrant family, whether they swam across the Rio Grande or they came here on a tourist visa and overstayed, but you have two families bidding for one apartment, that apartment will cost more because prices will go up. So the number one thing we can do in this country to reduce prices is to reduce the demand that comes from 20 to 30 million people being here that should not be.
Okay, what would the number two thing we could do be?
The number two thing we could do, well, I guess it would be to continue to increase energy production in this country. Again, prices are driven by supply and demand. The other way, so one way you reduce prices is you reduce supply. I'm sorry, is you reduce demand. The other way you reduce prices is you increase supply. And so if we can create more forms of energy, if we can drill more, if we can bring in more energy, open up more sources, that will increase the supply of energy and that will bring down energy prices. But those are really the only two ways to reduce prices: reduce demand or increase supply. And we need to be focused on doing both of those.
I want to go back to Iran and the connection to the economy and fuel prices.
Sure.
You have said that
By the way, to go back to that, Iran is a great example. Why have oil prices gone up a little bit? Because since the conflict in Iran started, because the supply of oil went down. Less supply, higher prices. It's not the war, it's not the fight per se that raised prices. It's less oil going through the Strait of Hormuz. So if
less
everyone was
oil is going through
fighting,
the Strait of Hormuz
right?
because of this fighting.
Correct. But I agree with you. But my point is if the fight was going on and the same amount of oil was going through, prices wouldn't have changed. That's why I'm making the point that it's all about supply and demand. And you are correct. You are correct. Less supply is going through because of the conflict. So that is true. Prices are maybe $1 higher a gallon than they otherwise would be, and that's not a good thing. But the problem we have is the cost of Iran firing a nuclear weapon at the United States that would destroy Miami or Orlando or Washington, D.C. or New York is a price that we simply can't afford. There's no question it has had a consequence on gas prices. But the consequence of inaction was so much greater that there wasn't a choice but to act.
Well, in 2003, we saw Colin Powell go to the United Nations and make the case, regardless of whether the weapons of mass destruction were found or not at the time, that there was a sense of urgency to take action in Iraq. Why wasn't that case made to the American people, to Congress, to the UN in this case?
Well, I think that case is made all the time. I don't think there's broad disagreement. I don't think anyone disagrees with the notion that Iran was developing a nuclear weapon. I don't think anyone disagreed with the assessment that Iran wanted a nuclear weapon. I think the only disagreement was, should we do something about it? And for 47 years, we've had a lot of talking. And the decision was made, and I support it, that Iran was reaching a point of no return, that we wouldn't be able to stop it. And so that action was taken. But the idea that they were creating a nuclear weapon is not something even the Democrats that I serve with disagree with. Everyone agrees with that.
So at this point, in August of 2026, what does a successful endgame to this current conflict look like?
Well, two things. Number one is a free and open Strait of Hormuz to deal with that gas price issue that we talked about. But the second thing is Iran's permanent giving up of the desire to create a nuclear weapon. To put this in even simpler terms, Iran wasn't just trying to create a nuclear weapon. They were spending millions and millions and millions of dollars to create an intercontinental ballistic missile. Now, why did Iran need an intercontinental ballistic missile? People say, well, that's so they can attack Israel, and we don't care what happens to Israel. Well, Iran had all the missiles they needed to hit Israel. They didn't need to create an intercontinental ballistic missile to hit Israel. Why did Iran need an intercontinental ballistic missile? To hit one place and one place only, and that's the United States of America. All of the people in the region, they could hit with the weapons they have. So they were not only focused on building a nuclear weapon, they were focused on building a device that could deliver that nuclear weapon to the United States. And when your country is threatened, you have to act. And that's what the president did, and I support him in doing that.
Randy Fine is District 6's representative in Congress.
Engage is a production of Central Florida Public Media. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Richard Copeland is our senior producer. I'm Sharon Stone. You can reach us anytime with questions, comments, or story ideas. Send an email to engage@cfpublic.org. Thanks for listening.